You think you know royal families? Think again. The Habsburgs were Europe's ultimate power players. A dynasty so powerful they shaped kingdoms, started wars, and left behind a legacy that still echoes through history. But forget the dry textbooks. What if we told you that behind the grand titles and glittering crowns were people given nicknames that stuck like glue? Names that tell stories of their triumphs, their quirks, and sometimes their deepest tragedies. These aren't just labels, they are whispers from the past, clues to lives stranger and more dramatic than any TV show. Prepare to uncover the shocking truth behind 10 legendary Habsburg figures revealed through the names the world gave them. Number 1. Marie Antoinette, Madame Deficit. The young Archduchess, Maria Antonia, born into the Grand Austrian Habsburg court in 1755, faced a destiny entirely unlike her many siblings. Her mother, the formidable Empress Maria Theresa, held a firm hand over her vast family. Each child a pawn in the intricate game of European diplomacy. For Antonia, the game involved a marriage that would change her life and European history forever. She was chosen to bridge a long-standing rivalry, a union meant to solidify peace between the powerful Habsburgs and their former enemies, the French Bourbons. Her groom was Louis Auguste, the Dauphin of France, a shy, awkward boy who would one day become King Louis XVI. Antonia's journey from Vienna to Versailles in 1770 was a meticulously choreographed affair, a spectacle designed to impress and to signify the new alliance. Every detail was planned, from the grand pavilions erected for her on the border, to the ceremonial handover where she shed her Austrian clothes for French ones, symbolizing her transformation. But despite the pomp, the transition was not easy for the 14-year-old girl. Versailles was a gilded cage, a place of suffocating etiquette and endless public scrutiny. She was expected to conform to produce heirs and to uphold the ancient traditions of the French court. Her early years as Dauphine were marked by a lack of fulfillment and an increasing desire for freedom from the rigid court life. Louis Auguste, her husband, was kind but indifferent, more interested in hunting and locksmithing than in the affairs of the heart or state. Antonia, vivacious and spirited, found herself surrounded by people who judged her every move. She sought solace in frivolous pursuits and friendships, often with individuals who, it would later be said, encouraged her more extravagant tendencies. When Louis XVI ascended to the throne in 1774, Marie Antoinette became Queen of France. Her new status brought even greater visibility and, some claimed, a more pronounced taste for luxury. The nickname, Madame Deficit, began to circulate, not immediately upon her ascension, but as her perceived spending habits increasingly clashed with the growing financial woes of the French state. France was burdened by immense debt, exacerbated by its support for the American War of Independence, and years of mismanagement. The common people faced hardship, and their resentment simmered beneath the surface of the glittering Parisian society. The Queen's extravagant fashion choices became a lightning rod for criticism. She favored elaborate hairstyles, sometimes piled so high with plumes and ornaments they were referred to as poufs, which could reach several feet above her head. Her dresses were made of the finest silks and laces. Her jewels sparkled with diamonds. Her private estate, the Petit Trianon, a smaller chateau within the grounds of Versailles, became her personal refuge. Here she created an idealized rustic village, a hameau de la reine, where she and her friends could pretend to be milkmaids and shepherds, far removed from the pressures of court. While a common pastime for aristocrats of the era, this escape was seen by a struggling populace as a sign of her complete detachment. Stories, some true, many exaggerated or entirely fabricated, circulated through pamphlets and gossip. She was accused of lavish spending on gambling, on jewelry, on her numerous entertainments. The infamous affair of the diamond necklace in 1785 was a scandal that, despite her innocence, irrevocably damaged her public image. A con artist used the Queen's name to defraud royal jewelers of an impossibly expensive diamond necklace. Even though she was proven to have no involvement, the public saw her as complicit, a symbol of royal excess and deceit. The incident cemented the perception of her as a wasteful monarch, draining the nation's treasury. The nickname Madame Deficit crystallized these sentiments. It was not a term of endearment, but a label steeped in resentment, a direct accusation that her lifestyle was a significant contributor to the nation's financial ruin. In reality, the Queen's personal expenses, while substantial, were a mere fraction of the national budget, and certainly not the primary cause of France's colossal debt. However, in the court of public opinion fueled by propaganda and the desperate circumstances of ordinary people, she became the embodiment of everything wrong with the monarchy. As the financial crisis deepened, leading to widespread famine and unrest, the Queen's image continued to deteriorate. Her perceived indifference, her foreign birth, and her alleged moral failings were all magnified by a desperate populace looking for a scapegoat. The initial whispers of Madame Deficit grew into shouts of protest. The grand ceremonies and the lavish entertainments of Versailles, once symbols of royal power, now seemed like cruel jokes played on a starving nation. The storming of the Bastille in 1789 marked the true beginning of the French Revolution. The royal family was eventually forced to leave Versailles for Paris, effectively becoming prisoners in their own capital. Even in confinement, the shadow of Madame Deficit followed Marie Antoinette. Her every action, her every tear was viewed through the lens of her past, perceived extravagances. The name clung to her, a bitter reminder of how a queen, once celebrated as a bridge between empires, became a symbol of national bankruptcy in the eyes of her people. Her story ended tragically, but the nickname she earned remains a powerful testament to the volatile relationship between royalty and public perception, especially when times are hard. Number 2. Franz Joseph I, the Old Man of Schönbrunn. Born in 1830, Archduke Franz Joseph was the eldest son, Karl and Princess Sophie of Bavaria. His childhood was not one of carefree play, but of rigorous training orchestrated primarily by his ambitious mother. Sophie, a woman of sharp intellect and formidable will, believed her son was destined for greatness. She carefully nurtured him, instilling in him a profound sense of duty, a meticulous work ethic, and an unwavering devotion to the Habsburg dynasty. The empire he was born into was a vast, sprawling entity, a mosaic of diverse peoples and languages, held together by centuries of tradition and the unifying presence of the emperor. His path to the throne was unexpected. The year 1848 saw a wave of revolution sweep across Europe, shaking the foundations of old monarchies. The Austrian Empire was no exception. Vienna erupted in protest, challenging the autocratic rule of Emperor Ferdinand I, who, though kindly, was seen as incapable of handling the crisis. Under pressure, Ferdinand abdicated, and his brother Franz Karl renounced his claim. Thus, in December 1848, at the tender age of 18, Franz Joseph found himself elevated to the imperial throne, inheriting an empire on the brink of collapse. His early reign was characterized by a determined effort to restore order and reassert imperial authority. He was a young man thrust into an impossible situation, facing rebellions in Hungary and Italy, and deep-seated political unrest throughout his domains. He governed with a steely resolve, centralizing power and implementing reforms he believed necessary to stabilize the empire. His personal life also saw significant change. In 1854, he married his cousin Elizabeth of Bavaria, known as Sisi, a woman of ethereal beauty and a fiercely independent spirit. Their marriage was complex, often strained by their differing personalities and the immense pressures of court life. The nickname, the Old Man of Schönbrunn, did not emerge in his youth. It was a moniker that gradually settled upon him over the decades, a reflection of his extraordinarily long reign and his unchanging routine. Schönbrunn Palace, the sprawling yellow Baroque residence on the outskirts of Vienna, became his preferred home and the heart of his empire. From this palace he conducted the daily business of state with unwavering discipline. He rose early, often by 4 a.m., and worked tirelessly, reviewing documents, signing decrees, and meeting officials. This rigorous schedule, which varied little over the course of more than 6 decades, became legendary. His image became synonymous with the stability and continuity of the empire. He dressed simply, usually in a military uniform, avoiding the flamboyant trappings of many European monarchs. His demeanor was reserved, his expression often somber. He seemed to embody the very spirit of duty, a stoic figure holding together a vast and increasingly complex realm. As time wore on and other monarchs came and went, Franz Joseph remained a constant fixture in a rapidly changing world. The phrase, "the Old Man of Schönbrunn," wasn't necessarily derogatory. It was more a descriptive acknowledgement of his enduring presence and his deep connection to the palace that served as his imperial headquarters. The personal tragedies that afflicted him further solidified this image of a lonely, enduring figure. His beloved cousin and only brother, Emperor Maximilian of Mexico, was executed by firing squad in 1867. His only son, Crown Prince Rudolf, died in a suspected murder-suicide pact with his mistress at Mayerling in 1889, a scandal that rocked Europe. His wife, Empress Elizabeth, was assassinated by an anarchist in Geneva in 1898. Each loss added another layer to his melancholic public persona, making him seem like a man burdened by fate, yet still steadfastly at his post. He witnessed immense shifts in technology, society, and politics, the rise of industrialization, the spread of nationalism, the decline of old aristocratic orders. He lived through it all, often resisting change, clinging to the traditions he believed defined the Habsburg monarchy. His famous handlebar mustache and his slightly stooped posture became instantly recognizable symbols across Europe. He was seen as a relic of a bygone era, yet his longevity commanded a certain respect, even as the empire faced internal strife and external threats. His steady presence at Schönbrunn, day in and day out, provided a sense of continuity. By the turn of the 20th century, Franz Joseph was not just an emperor. He was an institution. Foreign dignitaries and his own subjects alike often referred to him as the Old Man of Schönbrunn, with a mix of reverence, pity, and even a degree of affection. He was the grandfatherly figure, the last living link to an earlier age, a sovereign who had ruled longer than almost any other in European history. His reign saw the empire transformed into the Austro-Hungarian duel. Monarchy in 1867, a compromise designed to appease Hungarian demands for greater autonomy. This major restructuring happened under his watch, an event he meticulously oversaw from his Schönbrunn office. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand, his nephew and heir presumptive, was assassinated in Sarajevo in 1914. It was the final devastating blow. The 76-year-old emperor was faced with the ultimate crisis. He signed the declaration of war against Serbia, setting in motion the chain of events that led to the First World War. He remained on the throne, overseeing the initial years of the brutal conflict. His aged figure a symbol of a fading world order, he continued his relentless work schedule, often to the consternation of his advisors who worried about his health. The image of the tireless, duty-bound Old Man of Schönbrunn persisted until his death in November 1916, 2 years before the empire he had governed for 68 years would crumble. Number 3. Ferdinand I of Austria, the Good. Born in 1793 in Vienna, Ferdinand I faced challenges from the very beginning of his life. He was the eldest son of Emperor Francis I, and his birth was greeted with the usual fanfare for a future monarch. However, it soon became apparent that Ferdinand suffered from various health issues, including epilepsy, hydrocephalus, and a general frailty that impacted his physical and mental development. His speech was often unclear, and his understanding of complex matters was limited. These challenges meant that, from a young age, many in the Habsburg court, including his own parents, doubted his capacity to rule. Despite his limitations, Ferdinand was raised with the full expectations of a crown prince. He received extensive education, though he often struggled with academic subjects. He was tutored in languages, history, and the arts, but his true passions lay in simpler pursuits. He found joy in gardening, particularly cultivating cacti, and he had a deep love for music, especially the works of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He was known for his gentle disposition, his kindly nature, and his genuine affection for the people around him. He showed no malice or cruelty, characteristics that stood in stark contrast to the often ruthless world of European power politics. His father, Emperor Francis I, recognized Ferdinand's limitations and, in an effort to ensure the stability of the empire, established a system whereby the state would be governed by a council of regency after his death. Effectively ruling in Ferdinand's name, this council was dominated by Prince Clemens, von Metternich, the influential foreign minister, and Count Franz Anton von Kolowrat-Lebstinski, the powerful minister of state. When Francis I died in 1835, Ferdinand descended to the imperial throne as Ferdinand I of Austria. He was also King of Hungary, Bohemia, and other territories within the vast Habsburg domain. The nickname Ferdinand the Good, or sometimes Ferdinand the Kind, began to circulate during his reign. It was a reflection of his benevolent temperament and the general public's perception of him as a harmless, well-meaning figurehead. Unlike some monarchs who ruled with an iron fist or were known for their harshness, Ferdinand presented a stark contrast. He was polite, even deferential to his ministers and those around him. He rarely, if ever, became angry or lost his temper. His personal secretary, Baron Karl Friedrich Kubeck, reportedly said of him, "He is no ruler, but a kindly person." The system of government meant that major decisions were made by the Regency Council, but Ferdinand still carried out many ceremonial duties. He attended state functions, reviewed troops, and met with dignitaries. During these public appearances, he was generally well received. People saw his mildness and interpreted it as a sign of his good heart, even if they knew he was not truly in control. He was known for his sincere concern for the welfare of his subjects, often asking about their troubles and expressing genuine sympathy. While his influence on policy was minimal, his personal decency was widely acknowledged. One famous anecdote that illustrates his personality involves a bread shortage in Vienna. When informed that people were starving because they had no bread, Ferdinand reportedly replied, "But I am the emperor, and I have bread, so why do they not have bread?" This quote, whether entirely accurate or apocryphal, highlights his detachment from the practical realities of governing, but also his simple, good-hearted nature. He did not grasp the complexities of economic policy, but he genuinely wished for his people to be fed. Another story recounts his fondness for a particular dish, often said to be a type of dumpling. If his meal was not prepared to his liking, he would simply repeat, "I am the emperor, and I want dumplings." This often led to his culinary wishes being immediately fulfilled, choking his benign, almost childlike authority within his personal sphere. These small, everyday interactions, when contrasted with the grand affairs of state he barely touched, further cemented his image as the good. His reign was largely peaceful until 1848, a year that forever altered the course of European history. The revolutions of 1848, sparked by a combination of liberalism, nationalism, and economic hardship, swept through the Habsburg Empire with unprecedented force. Vienna, his own capital. The demands for constitutional reform, freedom of the press, and the end of serfdom put immense pressure on the imperial government. Ferdinand, due to his health, was simply not equipped to deal with such a crisis. His inability to provide strong leadership became glaringly obvious. Metternich, the architect of the conservative order, was forced to resign. The imperial family fled Vienna for Innsbruck. The sheer chaos and the breakdown of authority were overwhelming. Recognizing that his continued presence on the throne was a hindrance to stability, and urged by his strong-willed wife, Empress Maria, Anna, and his ambitious sister-in-law, Archduchess Sophie, Ferdinand agreed to abdicate. In December 1848, at the age of 55, he signed the papers ceding the throne to his nephew, the young Archduke Franz Joseph. After his abdication, Ferdinand retired to Ploskovice Castle in Bohemia, and later to Prague. He lived a remarkably peaceful and comfortable life, far removed from the political turmoil of the empire. He continued his passion for gardening, enjoyed his music, and received visits from his family. His gentle nature remained unchanged. The name Ferdinand the Good became his lasting legacy, a title that perhaps reflected less on his capabilities as a ruler and more on his personal character, a monarch who, despite his limitations, possessed a genuine kindness that earned him a unique place. He lived for another 27 years, dying in 1875, a quiet and beloved figure, until the very end. Number 4. Joseph II, the Revolutionary Emperor. Born in 1741, Archduke Joseph was the eldest son of Empress Maria Theresa, one of the most powerful and influential rulers of the 18th century, and Emperor Francis I. From a young age, Joseph was exposed to the complexities of governing a vast and diverse empire. His mother, a formidable figure who personally oversaw his education, instilled in him a deep sense of duty and a passion for reform. However, their personalities often clashed. Maria Theresa, while a reformer herself, was cautious and pragmatic. Joseph, on the other hand, was an idealist, impatient and driven by a fervent belief in the enlightenment principles of reason and efficiency. He longed to modernize the Habsburg lands, transforming them into a model state based on logic and progress. For many years, Joseph was a co-ruler with his mother. After his father's death in 1765, as co-regent and later as emperor, upon Maria Theresa's death in 1780, Joseph embarked on a radical program of reforms that earned him the nickname the Revolutionary Emperor. This title was not given by his supporters in admiration, but often by those who found his reforms too sweeping, too sudden, and too disruptive to the established order. He was a monarch who sought to impose change from above, using the full power of the state to reshape society. One of his most significant and revolutionary acts was the abolition of serfdom in 1781. This decree freed millions of peasants from their hereditary bondage to the land and their landlords, granting them personal liberty, the right to marry without permission, and the freedom to move and choose their occupations. This was a truly radical step for its time, challenging the fundamental feudal structures that had underpinned European society for centuries. It aimed to transform peasants into productive, mobile citizens rather than mere property. Joseph also championed religious tolerance. In 1781, he issued the Edict of Tolerance, which granted limited religious freedom to Protestants, Orthodox Christians, and Jews. Within his Catholic empire, while it did not grant full equality, it was a profound shift from the strict Catholic orthodoxy that had previously been enforced. He suppressed unnecessary monasteries, believing that only those engaged in truly useful work such as teaching or nursing should exist. The wealth from these dissolved institutions was then used to fund new parishes and schools, demonstrating his belief in state-directed social welfare. His reforms extended to every aspect of life. He reformed the justice system, abolishing the death penalty for a time and ensuring greater equality before the law. He reformed education, creating new schools, and making primary education compulsory. He introduced a new land tax designed to be equitable and based on the actual productivity of the land, regardless of the social status of the owner. This angered nobles and the church, who had previously enjoyed extensive tax exemptions. He even attempted to reform the burial customs, ordering simpler, cheaper burials to conserve resources, a measure that was met with widespread public ridicule and resistance. Joseph's approach was often described as Josephinist, characterized by a belief in enlightened absolutism. He believed he knew what was best for his people, and that it was his duty to implement these changes, even if they were unpopular. He traveled extensively throughout his empire, often incognito, to observe conditions firsthand and to bypass official channels, a practice quite unusual for a monarch of his stature. He would listen to the complaints of ordinary people, yet he rarely wavered in his conviction that his reforms were necessary and beneficial, despite the opposition they generated. The nickname the Revolutionary Emperor captured the essence of his reign. He acted with a speed and a comprehensiveness that stunned his contemporaries. He issued thousands of decrees and patents, attempting to regulate everything from agricultural practices to guild regulations. His reforms were a top-down revolution, an attempt to rationalize and standardize an ancient, diverse, and often chaotic empire. He sought to create a unified state, erasing regional differences and ancient privileges, believing that uniformity would lead to greater efficiency and prosperity. However, his reforms were also met with significant resistance from almost every segment of society. The nobility resented the loss of their feudal rights and tax exemptions. The church opposed his secularizing tendencies and the suppression of monasteries. National groups, particularly in Hungary and the Austrian Netherlands, resisted his attempts to centralize power and impose German as the language of administration. His foreign policy was also often adventurous and costly, drawing the empire into wars that drained its resources. As his reign progressed, the initial enthusiasm for some of his reforms gave way to widespread discontent. Rebellions flared up in the Austrian Netherlands and Hungary. Joseph, though highly intelligent and well-intentioned, often lacked the political tact and patience required to implement such sweeping changes successfully. He did not build consensus. He dictated. He once famously remarked, "I have made philosophy the lawmaker of my empire," a clear indication of his belief in the power of reason, even at the expense of tradition or popular will. Joseph II died in 1790, his health broken by the relentless work and the bitter disappointments of his reign. He famously wrote his own epitaph, "Here lies a prince whose intentions were pure, but who had the misfortune to fail in all his enterprises." While this was a harsh self-assessment, it reflected the profound frustration of a monarch who had tried to revolutionize an empire, but faced immense inertia and opposition. His successor, his brother Leopold II, spent much of his short reign undoing many of Joseph's most radical policies in an attempt to restore order. Despite the partial regalo of his reforms, the impact of the revolutionary emperor was undeniable. He had planted seeds of change that would continue to grow, laying the groundwork for a more modern state, even if his methods were too abrupt for his own time. Number 5. Maria Theresa, the mother of Europe. Born in 1717, Archduchess Maria Theresa was an unlikely heir to the sprawling Habsburg domains. Her father, Emperor Charles VI, had no sons, and despite a lifetime of political maneuvering to secure her succession through the Pragmatic Sanction, many European powers remained skeptical or hostile to the idea of a woman ruling such a vast empire. Her childhood was spent under the shadow of this uncertain future, but she was raised with a strong sense of duty and a solid education, though perhaps not specifically trained for the art of war or diplomacy. Her personal life, however, was filled with joy. She deeply loved and eventually married Duke Francis Stephen of Lorraine, a union that was unusually for royalty. Based on genuine affection, her ascension to the throne in 1740 was immediately met with crisis. No sooner had her father died than several European powers, disregarding the Pragmatic Sanction, launched attacks on Habsburg territories, most notably Frederick the Great of Prussia, who seized the rich province of Silesia. This began the War of the Austrian Succession, a brutal struggle that lasted for 8 years and tested Maria Theresa's resolve to its absolute limits. During this period, she famously appealed to the Hungarian nobles for support, presenting her infant son Joseph to them and securing their loyalty, a testament to her charisma and determination. Despite losing Silesia, Maria Theresa emerged from the war as a formidable ruler. She had proved her mettle, secured her lands, and solidified her position. It was after this period of intense conflict, and throughout her long reign, which lasted for 40 years, that she gradually earned the unofficial title of the Mother of Europe. This nickname reflected several aspects of her unique persona and her reign: her prodigious motherhood, her role as a matriarch figure among European royalty, and her comprehensive reforms that transformed her empire. First and foremost, Maria Theresa was a mother in the literal sense. She gave birth to 16 children, 10 of whom survived to adulthood. This was an astonishing feat for any woman of the era, let alone a reigning monarch. Her children included 2 future Holy Roman Emperors, Joseph II and Leopold II, and the ill-fated Queen Marie Antoinette of France. Her constant pregnancies and the sheer size of her family made her an almost iconic representation of fertility and domesticity on the throne. She balanced the demands of ruling an empire with the very real joys and sorrows of raising a large family, often conducting state business while surrounded by her children. Beyond her own prolific motherhood, she became a mother to Europe. Through her ambitious marriage policy, she strategically arranged marriages for her many children into the major royal houses of Europe. Her daughters married into the Bourbon families of France, Spain, and Naples, Sicily. Her sons married into various German and Italian ducal families. This intricate web of alliances forged through her children earned her the reputation as Europe's most successful matchmaker, effectively creating a vast family network across the continent. She truly believed these dynastic ties would foster peace and stability, acting as a mother who connected the disparate nations of Europe through bloodlines. Furthermore, the Mother of Europe also referred to her deep commitment to the welfare and modernization of her own diverse realms. After the War of the Austrian Succession, Maria Theresa recognized that her empire needed fundamental changes to compete with rising powers like Prussia. She embarked on a series of wide-ranging reforms that touched almost every aspect of society. She reorganized the military, transforming it into a more professional and effective force. She reformed the tax system, ensuring that the nobility and clergy, who had largely been exempt, now contributed their fair share. This was a revolutionary move that significantly increased state revenues. She was also a passionate advocate for education. She founded numerous schools, including the Theresian Military Academy, and most notably the University of Innsbruck. She believed that an educated populace was essential for a strong state. She even established the University of Vienna's Faculty of Medicine, setting new standards for medical training. Her reforms aimed to create a more centralized and efficient state, streamlining administration and promoting a sense of shared purpose among her diverse subjects. She was also a patron of the arts and sciences, fostering a vibrant intellectual and cultural life. In Vienna, her personal connection with her subjects also contributed to the nickname. She was known for her accessibility and her genuine concern for the welfare of her people. She would often walk through the palace gardens, greeting ordinary citizens and listening to their petitions. She was pious, hard-working, and possessed a strong sense of pragmatism. Despite her imperial status, she cultivated an image that was in some ways relatable to the common person, a mother figure who cared for her vast family of subjects. The paradox of Maria Theresa was that while she modernized the state, she remained deeply conservative in many social and religious matters. She was a devout Catholic and was often intolerant of other faiths, despite her son Joseph II's more enlightened views. She suppressed secret societies and maintained strict censorship. Yet her reforms, particularly in education and administration, were progressive for her time and laid the groundwork for the future development of the Austrian Empire. By the time of her death in 1780, Maria Theresa had not only secured the Habsburg succession, but had also profoundly transformed her territories. She left behind a stronger, more centralized, and more prosperous state than the one she inherited. Her family, through her careful management, was spread across the most important thrones of Europe. She was remembered not just as a powerful empress, but as a devoted mother, a shrewd political operator, and a diligent reformer, truly earning her lasting title as the Mother of Europe. Number 6. Leopold I. Leopold the Hogmouth. Born in 1640, Leopold I was a younger son of Emperor Ferdinand III, destined for a career in the church. His early education focused on theology, Latin, and classical studies, preparing him for a life of quiet contemplation and ecclesiastical duties. He was a studious and pious young man, far removed from the rough and tumble world of imperial politics and military campaigns. However, fate had other plans for him. His elder brother, Ferdinand IV, the designated heir, tragically died in 1654. This sudden loss propelled Leopold reluctantly into the line of succession. Upon the death of his father in 1657, Leopold was elected Holy Roman Emperor in 1658. At the age of 18, he also became King of Hungary, Bohemia, and other Habsburg hereditary lands. His early reign was marked by immense challenges. Europe was a battleground, dominated by the ambitious French king Louis XIV, who sought to expand his power and territory. The Ottoman Empire, a persistent threat to the east, loomed large, periodically launching devastating invasions into Habsburg lands. The nickname Leopold the Hogmouth, or sometimes Leopold the Pigmouth, was not a reflection of his character or his reign's achievements, but rather a direct and somewhat cruel description of his physical appearance. Like many Habsburgs, Leopold bore the distinct family trait known as the Habsburg jaw or Habsburg lip. This genetic characteristic, a result of generations of intermarriage within the family, manifested as a prominent lower jaw, often accompanied by an underdeveloped upper jaw and a thick lower lip. For Leopold, these features were particularly pronounced. Contemporary portraits clearly show his prognathism, a condition where the lower jaw protrudes significantly. This physical characteristic made his speech sometimes difficult to understand and certainly made him stand out. It was a visible mark of his lineage, a constant reminder of the long line of Habsburgs from which he descended. While such nicknames might seem harsh, they were not uncommon in an era where physical traits were often used to identify or describe rulers, sometimes even in official documents. It was a descriptive, albeit unflattering label that highlighted a defining aspect of his appearance. Despite his physical appearance and his initial lack of preparation for rule, Leopold proved to be a surprisingly capable and resilient emperor. His reign, lasting for 47 years, was one of the longest in Habsburg history. He often preferred the quiet of his studies and his love for music and the arts, particularly opera. But he did not shirk his responsibilities. He was a devout Catholic and saw himself as a defender of Christendom against both the Protestant powers of Europe and the encroaching Ottoman Empire. His early life in the church gave him a deep understanding of theological matters, and his piety was sincere. He relied heavily on his advisors and generals, a reflection perhaps of his more scholarly inclinations. However, he also possessed a quiet determination and an unwavering commitment to the preservation of his dynasty and his empire. His court in Vienna became a center of Baroque art and music, attracting talent from across Europe, transforming the city into a cultural capital. The defining conflicts of his reign were the wars against the Ottoman Empire and the seemingly endless struggles against Louis XIV of France. In 1683, Vienna itself was besieged by a massive Ottoman army. Leopold, like his ancestors, was forced to flee, but under the brilliant leadership of his general, Prince Eugene of Savoy and Poniatowski, the Ottomans were decisively defeated at the Battle of Vienna. This victory marked a turning point in the centuries-long struggle between Christian Europe and the Ottoman Empire, pushing the Ottomans back from Central Europe and allowing the Habsburgs to expand their influence in the Balkans. This triumph was a major boost to his image, proving his resilience despite the personal physical trait. Leopold also led the Holy Roman Empire through several wars against France, most notably the War of the Grand Alliance and the War of the Spanish Succession. These conflicts were fought to prevent Louis XIV from dominating Europe and to secure the Habsburg claim to the vast Spanish inheritance. While the wars were costly and exhausting, Leopold's perseverance and the diplomatic efforts of his government ultimately ensured that a balance of power was maintained and that the Habsburgs retained significant influence in Europe. Even in official documents or contemporary histories, references to his mouth or jaw could be found, though usually in a more circumspect manner than the blunt hogmouth. The nickname was likely more prevalent in informal circles among the common people, or foreign observers who noted his distinctive features. It served as a quite memorable way to distinguish him, much like the Great or the Bald for other historical figures. By the time of his death in 1705, Leopold I had left a profound mark on his empire. He had successfully defended his territories, pushed back the Ottomans, and maintained the Habsburg presence as a major European power, despite facing the formidable might of France. He had done so while battling a distinct physical characteristic that others found noteworthy enough to turn into a lasting nickname. His long rule demonstrated that even a reluctant, scholarly emperor with a prominent jaw could effectively navigate the treacherous waters of 17th century European politics. Number 7. Rudolf II. The alchemist emperor. Born in 1552, Archduke Rudolf was the eldest surviving son of Emperor Maximilian II and Maria of Spain. From a young age, Rudolf was known for his quiet and introspective nature, a stark contrast to the more outgoing personalities of his siblings. He spent 8 formative years at the Spanish court of his uncle, King Philip II. A deeply devout and somber environment, this experience reinforced his natural inclination towards contemplation, a fascination with the mysterious and a preference for solitude over boisterous public life. Upon his return to Vienna, he seemed to find the formal court life stifling. When his father died in 1576, Rudolf ascended to the throne as Holy Roman Emperor, as well as King of Hungary and Bohemia. Almost immediately, he made a decision that set him apart from his predecessors and established the foundation for his enduring nickname. He moved the imperial court from Vienna to Prague. This was more than just a change of address. It was a deliberate choice to remove himself from the traditional political centers and create a new kind of imperial city, one where he could pursue his unique interests with fewer distractions. The nickname, the Alchemist Emperor, quickly took hold because of Rudolf's intense and obsessive interest in alchemy, astrology, and the occult sciences. His court in Prague became a magnet for an extraordinary array of scholars, artists, scientists, and charlatans from all over Europe. He employed famous astronomers like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler, who laid the groundwork for modern astronomy. But alongside these groundbreaking scientific minds, Rudolf also hosted a bewildering collection of alchemists, mystics, astrologers, and spiritualists. He spent vast sums of money funding their experiments, hoping to unlock the secrets of the universe, to find the philosopher's stone that would turn base metals into gold, or to discover the elixir of life. His fascination with alchemy was not merely a quirky hobby. It consumed him. He built elaborate laboratories within Prague Castle, filled with furnaces, retorts, and strange bubbling concoctions. He would spend hours observing the experiments, poring over ancient texts, and consulting with his alchemists. Stories circulated of strange smells emanating from the castle, of mysterious visitors, and of the emperor's intense, often secretive pursuits. This singular focus on the esoteric, coupled with his reclusive nature, meant that the business of governing often took a backseat. Rudolf was also a passionate and discerning collector of art and curiosities. His Kunstkammer, or Cabinet of Curiosities, housed an astonishing array of objects, natural specimens, scientific instruments, rare artifacts, and works of art by masters like Albrecht Dürer, Paul Veronese, and many others. He was particularly drawn to unusual, grotesque, or fantastical pieces. This collection reflected his desire to understand the world through a synthesis of art, science, and the mystical, a truly Renaissance approach that saw no clear division between these fields. However, his obsession with collecting further distracted him from political affairs, as he would spend fortunes on acquiring new items. The political realities of the Holy Roman Empire at the time were complex and volatile. The religious tensions between Catholics and Protestants were escalating, eventually leading to the 30 Years' War shortly after his death. Rudolf, isolated in Prague, often neglected urgent matters of state. He rarely attended Reichstag meetings, delayed decisions, and was suspicious of his own family and advisors. His growing melancholy and periods of mental instability further fueled the perception that he was more interested in magical pursuits than in the mundane tasks of governance. Rumors and gossip about the alchemist emperor were rife throughout Europe. Some saw him as a brilliant but eccentric patron of knowledge, pushing the boundaries of understanding. Others viewed him as a madman, squandering imperial wealth on fanciful nonsense while his empire teetered on the brink of religious war. He became a figure of fascination and ridicule, a monarch whose throne was less a seat of power and more a laboratory for arcane research. His personal life was equally unconventional. He never married and had no legitimate heirs, a matter of great concern for the Habsburg dynasty. He often retreated further into his private world, shunning public appearances, and increasingly reliant on a small circle of trusted, often equally eccentric, companions. His paranoia grew, and he became convinced that plots were being hatched against him. By the early 17th century, the political situation became untenable. His brother, Archduke Matthias, led a family coalition against him, accusing him of mismanaging the empire and threatening to depose him. In 1608, Matthias forced Rudolf to cede control of Hungary, Austria, and Moravia. In 1611, Matthias also gained control of Bohemia, including Prague, effectively stripping Rudolf of all real power, leaving him emperor in title only. Rudolf lived out his final months as a virtual prisoner in Prague Castle, still surrounded by his alchemists and his vast collection, but a monarch dethroned by his own family. Rudolf II died in 1612, a year after his effective deposition. His reign is remembered as a period of intellectual ferment and artistic brilliance in Prague, but also as a time of political stagnation and rising religious tensions that would culminate in catastrophe. The nickname the Alchemist Emperor encapsulates his unique legacy, a ruler whose true passion lay not in the traditional affairs of state, but in the pursuit of hidden knowledge and the mysteries of the universe, a pursuit that both illuminated and ultimately overshadowed his reign. Number 8. Maximilian I, the Last Knight. Born in 1459, Maximilian was the son of Emperor Frederick III and Eleanor of Portugal. From his earliest days, he displayed a keen intellect, a spirited personality, and a natural athleticism that set him apart. His father, a cautious and often slow-moving ruler, initially struggled to secure the Habsburg position. But Maximilian was destined to change that. He was educated in the chivalric traditions of the age, learning horsemanship, jousting, and the use of weapons, alongside classical studies and languages. He truly embodied the ideals of the knightly class, even as the world around him was beginning to change fundamentally. The nickname, the Last Knight, was not merely a sentimental title, but a deeply descriptive one, reflecting Maximilian's passionate adherence to the ideals of chivalry and his efforts to revive them. Even as gunpowder and shifting political landscapes rendered the traditional knight obsolete, he saw himself as the embodiment of these virtues: bravery, honor, skill in combat, and a certain romanticized view of warfare. He actively promoted tournaments and jousts, participating in them himself with gusto, often under disguises to test his skills. He was a master of arms renowned for his physical prowess and courage. His marriage in 1477 to Mary, the wealthy heiress of Burgundy, was a pivotal moment. This union brought the vast and rich Burgundian Netherlands into the Habsburg fold, but it was not without immediate conflict. The French king, Louis XI, also coveted these territories, leading to fierce battles. Maximilian, leading his own troops, proved to be a skilled military commander, famously winning the Battle of Guinegate in 1479, a victory that helped secure his wife's inheritance. Despite her tragic death in a hunting accident in 1482, Maximilian's dedication to the knightly ideal extended beyond personal combat. He was a prolific patron of arts and literature, often commissioning works that celebrated his own image as a chivalrous hero. He, personally, oversaw and contributed to epic poems like Feodonk and Weisskönig, which chronicled his life, his adventures, and his virtues, presenting them in the allegorical style of medieval romance. These works were designed to burnish his image as the quintessential knight-errant battling giants and rescuing damsels, even as he was grappling with real-world political problems. He embraced the printing press, a new technology to disseminate these works and control his public narrative, a surprisingly modern approach for a last knight. Despite his romanticized view of warfare, Maximilian was also a shrewd politician and a pragmatic ruler. He understood the changing nature of warfare and governance. He reformed the Habsburg military, incorporating Swiss pikemen, tactics, and improving artillery, recognizing the growing importance of firearms over traditional cavalry charges. He also introduced significant administrative reforms, creating more centralized financial and judicial institutions that strengthened the Habsburg state. He was instrumental in establishing the institutions of the Holy Roman Empire, attempting to bring some order to its often fragmented territories. The nickname also highlighted his position at a crossroads of history. The late 15th and early 16th centuries were a period of profound transition. The age of exploration was dawning, new technologies were emerging, and the political map of Europe was being redrawn. Feudalism was slowly giving way to more centralized nation-states. The image of the armored knight, once the undisputed master of the battlefield, was becoming obsolete in the face of gunpowder and professional armies. Maximilian, in his unwavering embrace of chivalry, appeared to be clinging to an older, fading world, even as he helped usher in the new. He was constantly engaged in diplomacy, forming strategic alliances. Through marriage, a hallmark of Habsburg expansion, his most famous marital coup was arranging the marriage of his son, Philip the Handsome, to Joanna of Castile, and his daughter Margaret to Joanna's brother John, Prince of Asturias. Though John died young, the marriage of Philip and Joanna ultimately led to the Habsburg succession in Spain, establishing the most powerful dynasty of the 16th century. These matrimonial strategies, while highly effective, were a far cry from the jousts and sword fights of a traditional knight. Maximilian's reign was marked by ambition, often beyond his means. He dreamt of crusades against the Ottoman Turks, a final, grand chivalric enterprise that never fully materialized. He even harbored aspirations to become pope, a truly audacious idea for a secular ruler. His relentless pursuit of glory and his often audacious plans often left him in financial straits, but his charisma and vision often inspired loyalty. By the time of his death in 1519, Maximilian I had indeed left a powerful mark. He had significantly expanded Habsburg power and laid the groundwork for his grandson, Charles V, to inherit a vast empire stretching from Spain to the Holy Roman Empire. He had modernized aspects of his military and administration, yet he continued to be seen and saw himself as the embodiment of an older, nobler ideal. He was an emperor who fought with a lance, planned his own grand funeral, and penned chivalric romances, a figure who truly earned his enduring title, the Last Knight, a poignant symbol of a fading era and a new one dawning. Number 9. Philip I of Castile. Philip the Handsome, born in Bruges in 1478, Philip was the son of Emperor Maximilian I and Mary of Burgundy. From his earliest years, it was clear Philip possessed exceptional physical attractiveness. He inherited the features of his mother, known for her beauty, and lacked the distinctive Habsburg jaw that would become characteristic of later generations. He grew into a tall, athletic, and elegantly dressed young man, charming and madame. His upbringing was in the rich Burgundian court, a center of European culture and luxury which fostered his appreciation for refinement and splendor. The nickname Philip the Handsome was not simply a polite, descriptive title. It was a universally acknowledged attribute. It was mentioned in diplomatic dispatches chronicled by historians and used by the common people. His good looks were undeniably a significant part of his public image, and often contrasted with his political abilities, which were seen by some as less impressive than his appearance. He was a popular figure, especially among women, and his charm was noted by many who met him. His destiny, however, was shaped by dynastic ambitions. In 1496, at the age of 18, Philip was married to Joanna, the third child of the powerful Catholic monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. This marriage was a cornerstone of his father Maximilian's grand matrimonial strategy, designed to encircle France and expand Habsburg influence. Joanna, though highly intelligent, was also known for her intense emotional nature, which would later earn her the tragic nickname Joanna the Mad. Their wedding, celebrated with great pomp and circumstance in Lille, was followed by a journey to Spain. Joanna, however, was deeply in love with her handsome husband, a love that bordered on obsession. Philip, while seemingly affectionate at times, was also known for his philandering. This often led to dramatic scenes of jealousy and distress from Joanna, further highlighting the emotional imbalance in their relationship. Despite the personal turmoil, their union was incredibly fruitful from a dynastic perspective. They had 6 children, including the future Emperor Charles V, who would inherit the vast Habsburg and Spanish empires. The unexpected deaths of Joanna's older siblings and her nephew made her the heiress to the vast Spanish kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. This sudden shift thrust Philip as her husband into the heart of Spanish politics. He immediately became a contender for power alongside his formidable father-in-law, Ferdinand of Aragon. Philip's ambition, combined with his natural charm, made him a popular figure among a faction of Castilian nobles who resented Ferdinand's Aragonese influence. In 1504, upon the death of Queen Isabella of Castile, Joanna became queen. Because of Joanna's increasing mental instability, Philip immediately sought to assert his own authority as King of Castile by right of his marriage. He arrived in Spain with a retinue of Burgundian courtiers eager to take control. His handsome appearance and gracious manners initially won over many Castilians who saw him as a fresh alternative to the aging Ferdinand. He was formally recognized as King Philip I of Castile and Company, ruling with Joanna. However, his reign was short and controversial. He showed little respect for Spanish customs and institutions, preferring to surround himself with his Burgundian advisors. He also made decisions that alienated powerful Spanish nobles and upset the delicate balance of power that Ferdinand had carefully constructed. His political maneuvers were often seen as opportunistic, aimed solely at consolidating his own power at the expense of his wife's father. Philip's rule as King of Castile was brief. In September 1506, after less than 2 years on the Spanish throne, he unexpectedly fell ill while playing pelota, a type of handball, and died a few days later at the age of 28. His sudden death sparked widespread grief, particularly from his devoted wife Joanna, whose mental state deteriorated further into what was described as a deep and lasting madness. She refused to allow his body to be properly interred for many years, traveling with his coffin throughout Spain, believing he would one day revive. The legacy of Philip the Handsome is intertwined with both his striking appearance and his pivotal role in European dynastic history. His looks captivated his contemporaries and formed a lasting part of his historical image. Yet, his brief and turbulent reign in Castile also demonstrated that charm and good looks alone were not sufficient to navigate the complex political landscape of early modern Europe. He was a figure of undeniable appeal whose early death profoundly impacted the Spanish succession, paving the way for the reign of his son, Charles V, the most powerful ruler of his age, who inherited the very disparate characteristics of both his handsome father and his brilliant but troubled mother. Number 10. Charles II of Spain, the Bewitched. Born in 1661 in Madrid, Charles II was the last Habsburg king of Spain, and his life was a testament to the tragic consequences of generations of intense royal intermarriage. His father, King Philip IV of Spain, was Philip's niece. Charles had an inbreeding coefficient higher than any other known individual in history, a stark reflection of the Habsburg dynasty's desperate efforts to preserve its bloodline and consolidate power within a narrow familial circle. From birth, it was clear he was a fragile child. The nickname El Hechidod, which translates to the Bewitched or the Accursed, did not emerge from a single event, but was a collective, sorrowful response to his lifelong physical and mental infirmities. He was a sickly child, unable to speak until the age of 4, and unable to walk until 8. He suffered from an enlarged head, a prominent jaw and tongue that made speaking and eating difficult, and a general frailty that left him susceptible to constant illness. His intelligence was widely considered to be significantly impaired. As he grew older, his physical deformities became more pronounced. His famously exaggerated Habsburg jaw was so severe that his upper and lower teeth could not meet, making chewing almost impossible and causing him to drool. His tongue was so large it reportedly made his speech almost unintelligible. He was often weak, suffering from convulsions, fevers, and various other ailments that plagued him throughout his life. These physical manifestations were seen by many as signs of a deeper, perhaps supernatural affliction. The Spanish court, deeply religious and steeped in superstition, struggled to comprehend Charles's condition. In an era when disease was often attributed to divine displeasure or malevolent forces, his persistent ill health and perceived mental deficiencies were not understood as genetic consequences. Instead, the popular explanation that took root even within the highest circles of power was that the king was cursed, or, more commonly, bewitched. The nickname the Bewitched thus gained currency. A desperate attempt to explain what seemed otherwise inexplicable. This belief in his bewitchment led to increasingly bizarre and desperate measures. Exorcisms were performed on the king, with priests attempting to drive out evil spirits believed to be tormenting him. Foreign potentates, even the Pope himself, dispatched relics and holy water in an effort to cure him. Court figures, including his own mother, the Queen Regent, Mariana, genuinely believed in the malevolent influence of witchcraft. They feared that a demonic presence was hindering his ability to produce an heir, a matter of paramount importance for the future of the Spanish monarchy. Charles's reign, which began officially in 1665, when he was only 4 years old, was a period of decline for the Spanish Empire. The regency councils and the squabbling factions at court struggled to govern effectively, further exacerbating the country's problems. Charles himself was rarely able to exert much direct influence. He was a figurehead, his decisions often guided by advisors, and his periods of lucidity interspersed with long stretches of illness or mental fog. Despite his infirmities, he was reportedly kind and gentle, qualities that sometimes elicited pity rather than fear from his subjects. The inability of Charles II to produce an heir became the central drama of his adult life and the source of immense political tension. Across Europe, he married twice, first to Marie-Louise of Orleans and then to Maria Anna of Neuburg. But both marriages remained childless. This desperate situation fueled further anxieties about his bewitchment as the lack of an heir was interpreted as another sign of supernatural interference. The question of the Spanish succession became a major diplomatic crisis, with the various European powers vying for influence over the future of the vast Spanish Empire. His court was a strange mix of fervent piety, political intrigue, and medical desperation. Doctors of the time were largely helpless, unable to diagnose or treat his complex conditions. They resorted to traditional remedies, prayers, and sometimes even more extreme measures, all to no avail. The king's declining health and his perceived lack of vitality were public spectacles discussed in every European court and observed with both pity and calculated interest by rival powers who saw an opportunity in Spain's weakness. Charles II died in 1700 at the age of 38, his body reportedly a mass of deformities and internal decay. Before his death, under immense pressure, he named Philip, Duke of Anjou, the grandson of Louis XIV of France, as his successor. This decision immediately plunged Europe into the War of the Spanish Succession, a brutal conflict fought over who would inherit the vast Spanish domains. The war, a direct consequence of the bewitched king's childless reign, demonstrated the profound impact of his physical and mental state on the course of European history. His life and the nickname that clung to him remains a somber and powerful reminder of the devastating effects of generations of inbreeding within a powerful royal family, and how fear and superstition can shape perceptions in the absence of scientific understanding.